Hi, friends around the world. Welcome back to this episode of Complaint Free Life. And with you, your host, Cecile or Monova. And today, actually, I wanted to share my experiences of emergency and emotions. And the reason why I wanted to do that is because I wanted to contribute to making emotions not taboo or not something to be ashamed of, especially if we are going through such life-threatening events, right? Excuse me. I feel like I'm a bit sick, but that's how it is. So that's why I thought that I would share how I experienced it, how I went through it, what are the emotions that I have observed within myself, and also, what are the ways that I have observed other people reacting to this thing? And I'm often also observing patterns that we see often, and I feel like those patterns are coming from um, having everything together, being heroic, being strong, and God forbid you show your weakness. And these, I feel like, still are governing our reactions, even though as humans, we are obviously could react in so many different ways. But I feel like we are not only in those moments worried about how we're reacting. I mean, worried about all the events happening, but also worried about how we're reacting and how we should like pull ourselves together and put ourselves together and all the things, right? So that's why I want to share some of my observations and also just advocate for being honest with our emotions, being honest with what's going on, how it's going on, and how we're dealing with it. This is really my point of today's podcast. So, you've probably, if you have been following me for some time, you probably know that I am currently in Kiev, Ukraine, where unfortunately the war has been going on for some time now. And this the reason why I'm here is not as part of an organization or as part of a contract or whatever. I'm here because of love, and I'm here because of my loved ones here, my partner, my friends. And I just wanted to spend as much time as possible in these periods. And I've come the first time in on 2nd of April. At that time, it was in Uzhgorod, and we couldn't really come to Kiev at that time. And then I stayed here for almost 3 months because that's what my visa-free passport, Kyrgyz passport, allows to stay in Ukraine. And then I need to be 3 months away, and then I can come back, and that's what I did. And then I came back in the mid of September around. And then, so it's been almost a month that I'm here. And this time I came to Kiev, and I've been meeting all of my friends as well. So it's been great. And then the Monday, this is what I want to just share what happened and how it happened. So Monday morning, we woke up as usual, and then people went to work, and I was in the apartment as usual because that's as a life coach, I work from home from different places. So this time I was in the apartment, and all of a sudden I heard this huge explosion, right? So it was so heavy and it was happening very nearby that I could see the windows of the building across the street trembling. So I knew that something was up. So I called my partner and I said, do you know anything? What happened? What's happening? Because I didn't really know. And of course, there was nothing on the news at the time, obviously, because it just happened. And then he said that he didn't know and he'll find out. And then I heard another explosion happening. And that's when I thought, okay, I need to go out. And I saw that the buildings well, the building where we are, the corridors windows were shattered as well. So I went downstairs and I tried to stay in one of the cafes to see what's happening because I wasn't sure staying in the seventh floor is a good idea. And then and nothing was working obviously as well, so I don't know what I was thinking. So anyway, I came back and then my partner called and said that we need to go to the bomb shelter, right? So thankfully that was very close to where we live. And that's where I went. And what was interesting in that moment is that so he and his colleagues were standing underneath this arch, and I was outside on the street calling another friend to see if she's okay, and she wasn't picking up. So I just entered back the arch when another explosion nearby happened, like 100 meters away, and we saw all the windows shattering and everything shattering. And then in that moment, I remember before that I was feeling a lot of fear. But in that moment, I remember that my partner and another colleague, they we all like automatically went against the wall, right? So trying to protect ourselves. And then I remember in that moment, I did not feel anything at all. I felt like it was um I can't even explain. It was like, of course, on autopilot, right? So obviously my subconscious survival brain took charge of me, which is, I think, is one of the amazing abilities human beings have, which I'm so fascinated by all of the time. Anyway, so what's so fascinating is that that brain took over everything. We went down to the bomb shelter. There were other colleagues, and also, I remember thinking, excuse me, I remember thinking I should feel something, right? I don't know, I should feel something, but I don't, right? So it was like all blank, as if, like we'll deal with emotions later. So all I want to describe with this is I wasn't trying to change anything, trying to like I don't know, think make things differently. It was just all of this happening automatically. And I was just following those emotions, right? So I was just following whatever was happening in that moment. And and then I saw that one of our friends was having difficulty because she thought that some of the colleagues in the office might have been hurt or were part of the explosion or whatever. So she was very, very um, sad and crying about them. And I also saw some other people coming over to telling her it's going to be okay and stop crying, kind of a gesture, which I just don't understand why we human beings just want to shut up others. I mean, even with good intentions, obviously, right? But I just think that's not useful and helpful. But anyway, so as we were with her and as we clarified the situation and all, and we were all waiting there, and I remember in that moment thinking that it's what if we will never come out and all of the things that my brain tends to dramatize. And even as I'm thinking about all of those events, these interesting emotions are coming to me now. But all of that to say is that in that moment, I was also obviously I wasn't doing anything else. I was just sitting there and observing and looking at other people. And also I understand that like we were talking to each other and that was great. And in some ways I guess we also had no speech really, right? And that's I think also understandable, especially when I was talking to my dear Ukrainian friends. I was thinking what must be like for them to be doing this for so long, right? And And when I was looking at them, and I felt like I I can so understand if it's one of those moments where you're just speechless, where you're just stunned, and where you have no words, no tears, and no reaction in the way that maybe I was having at that time, because for me, still, it was a fresh experience in that scale. So, as all of that was happening, obviously the alarm signals of the building and everyone's alarm signals were not helping either, of all the announcements saying that there is fire, be careful, and all the things. And I think they keep like saying this, and I just realized that because it was so much for my emotional state, maybe, that I didn't even pay attention to them. So like I was saying, that the emotional state is so that in that moment I was just functioning without really feeling as if, right? So this is the feeling, or this is the state that I felt I was in. So after all of that, and I also described some of these in my post. So if you haven't read that, you can also have a look. But what I want to really concentrate here is, after that finished, and after we went out and we came to the apartment, and we were like sitting, and and we I felt like my emotions haven't really come back, as if it was like still in the mode of surviving, right? In the mode of, okay, what are we gonna do? How are we gonna go? Where we're gonna go? And all of these things. And in that moment, I remember the tram sound like distinctly, and I was thinking, oh my God, I'm so happy. Like, I've never been happy in my life for tram before. So, and I think my brain in that moment started then switching back to, okay, we're safe, we're okay. We can now think about other things, and we can feel, and all of the things. And that's, I think, when I started having this restlessness, right? So like feeling restless of, I need to do something, I need to be there, be somewhere, or do something, like some kind of version of get out of this danger, right? So that's obviously also very normal reaction of the body. So we went to a hotel to be close to the bomb shelter, and even in the hotel, I remember like sitting, lying in bed, or walking around, but I felt like someone else was holding me inside, like so tight, and that I was just trying to like loosen that grip, and it was almost like impossible in the first hours, I feel. And then after several hours of being there, being with those emotions, I realized that I let go of that grip, that I was finding myself okay again, and that I started relaxing a little bit, right? And then afterwards, I started, all of a sudden, I remembered also that when I was little, we used to have violence in the family, and after the violence, I remember always going outside and having these imaginary fantasies, and all the amazing things of dreaming, and all of these things. And I remember somehow my brain like offered that as a solution in that moment somehow, and I started doing that, and I felt so much strength again, so much clear. like everything was somehow clear, right? And the next morning, the alarms went again, and we started going to the bomb shelter for 5, 6 hours. I don't remember. And as I was sitting there, there were so many other people, most of them, I think, foreigners, because that hotel is particularly used by foreigners who work there, who work here, I think. And what I found interesting was that they organized for anyone who wanted to have a group to talk about coping mechanisms and all of this. And I felt like too tired to participate, but I was there to observe, and I found it so interesting that I would love to share as well. Is that so? I think the idea was amazing to talk about feelings, to talk about what's going on for you, right? But somehow I felt like everyone there had this urge of telling everyone else how we're gonna go be all fine, we all have our coping mechanisms and everything's fine. This kind of messaging, instead of what I would have wished is more honest, connecting feelings that we could share. Now, of course, now I'm coming to my next point is that usually the patterns that I saw in that group, and I also see in the other bomb shelters that I have been to recently, and where in emergencies, we seem to have this pattern of we need to keep cool, we need to show how strong we are, we need to show how resilient we are, we need to um, in a way sound heroic and continue going to work the next day and like pretend nothing happened, nothing bad happened, right? I feel like this seems to be the pattern that many of us are operating under. And of course, I'm not saying that in those groups or in bomb shelters that we could all start crying or showing all of our many emotions openly, and if we wanted to, absolutely. But what I'm really advocating, I guess, is that whatever the emotions we're feeling in those moments, right? Whether we're in the bomb shelter, whether we are immediately after the effect of the events like this, whenever we're experiencing that, why can't we just share and connect through those experiences? Why can't we just share, or if we want to share, of course, but even if we're not wanting to share, which I totally, absolutely understand, but why can't we just be honest with ourselves of what's happening and how it's happening, and not worrying about how other people are seeing us, how other people might think we're weak or we are not cool or we're not having everything put together and all of these things, and drop all of that and then instead just focus on feeling our emotions, sharing if we wanted to. If we don't want to, be okay with it and sit with it. um, what helps for me is doing all of those things. And what also helps me often is just being honest with all of those emotions that are happening, right? So, for instance, yesterday, the alarm went off again for the whole Ukraine. And as I heard this alarm, I was very scared again. And this time, what was interesting, well, yesterday was interesting, is that I was so sad and I was crying for some time, right? I was worried and I was crying, and then I was just sitting with it with all of that. And I received some phone calls where people told me that I shouldn't and all of this stuff. And I understand where they're coming from, but I'm also okay with being all of those, okay having those emotions, okay experiencing them, and okay to um not hide it, not make it wrong, right? So I guess this is the message really, is not to make those emotions wrong. So, and then afterwards I was feeling fine, and then I was doing many other things of my own. So, and at certain point I was also dancing. So I was looking at the situation from many different directions. And I was just thinking, like, how would other people in such situations, especially in organizations, especially in teams that we work, how do we react to this? How do we deal with it? And oftentimes, the pattern that I shared with you, I feel like that of we need to have some sort of like facade, or we need to have some sort of the exterior that we don't really go beyond, right? And all of that I feel like is coming from, again, us shaming those emotions, shaming those reactions in some way, or maybe judging them in some ways, or worried that other people may not perceive it the right way, whatever that means, right? Or we are worried that we don't want to be seen as weak, and that's why we can't really um, be dealing with emotions, and instead just keep going and keep doing things and keep all the things. And of course, I also hear the argument that we need to be there for other people. Absolutely, I love that. We can do that, but I would love to advocate, let's be there for ourselves first, simply because then we have more resources to be for other people. And simply because whenever we have our tank filled, right, meaning whenever we have processed our emotions, whenever we are recovering, or at least in the stage of having things out, and then giving ourselves time to feel okay, that we have the resources, then we start helping other people. Or we can, of course, do that in parallel as well. It's just that not to forget to do that. And I think this is what I'm really advocating is there is no point in shaming or judging our reactions in those moments, because I feel like in emergencies, in situations like this, we really show our true self in so many ways, and that's okay. And let's be there for our true self. And I would love to advocate for being that everywhere in every situation. But if even if we're not managing to do that in every situation, let's at least be that in the emergencies, in the most difficult parts of our lives, or in the most difficult experiences, because it doesn't make sense to be struggling about surviving and struggling about how others are seeing you, how you fear that the others might be perceiving you, how you need to be getting all the things done, or how you need to be just be cool and show that you are the greatest and hero, and you can just continue doing the work. I just wanted to advocate that if that's not what you're wanting, don't do that. Because again, as I said, after waking up like 3, 4 times in one of the nights because of alarms, I was feeling literally like sick in the morning. I was feeling my upper part of my stomach was like squeezing me so much that I was physically sick for some hours, and then I had to recover and stay there and then wake up. And and I was just imagining that I'm happy that I have that luxury to stay with it with this state, emotional state, and I don't need to be shaming myself for how I'm not going to work and doing all the other things, or not feeling like I need to be cool, strong, put together, and I need to just go out and do things even though I'm not feeling well. I'm happy that I don't need to do that, and I don't want to do that, and that's what I'm choosing. And I would love for you to consider that as well. And And the other thing is that the other argument that I see or hear is that while I'm experienced, right? I'm experienced, so I'm supposed to know what to do, or I'm supposed to handle all these emotions and whatever the things. And I also consider myself experienced. I have 10 years of humanitarian work experience. I have gone through an Iraqi refugee threatening to uh, kill himself by jumping off the window. I have been in the situation where an Uzbek refugee is threatening to burn herself, an Afghan refugee uh, threatening with a knife, going to the contact line here in Ukraine, where the mines were all around the house, around us, and the shooting started, and we needed to go away from that place. So many other examples like this. And in every of those examples, I have experienced what to do and how to react and all of these things, but I have found to be true that every experience is different. Every experience is different of the scale and everything else. So how you react in every experience will be different. And that's okay. And that's how I think it's supposed to be. And I just feel like we need to, as humans, stop judging ourselves and others harshly. And in those moments, I feel like it's time to not create more distance by showing that facade or putting that facade, but rather removing all of that and being human who reacts in so many different ways, being human who is there to share with each other, to connect with each other, to support each other, to be compassionate to each other, right? To understand and also not really wanting, like, not really expressing self-pity, which I think many of us also are afraid, but instead just being there for each other. I think this is what we're really wanting in all of our context, I feel. And let's go for it and do it. Let's go for it and share. Let's go for it and experience and process in. And even if we don't want to share, let's take time to process it ourselves. Let's take time to be honest with each other or with ourselves, right? Be honest with ourselves. We take time to look at what's really happening for us instead of I'm supposed to be this, I'm supposed to be that, or I am supposed to do this but later and not postponing it. Let's just be human, I guess, is the message is be let us be human and use that do no harm principle, for instance, in the way that let's not harm ourselves by putting the layering our emotions with shame and judgment and being strong and all of the things, and remove all of that and just be there for whatever is happening with yourself, and also be for other people if you can and if you want to, without really expecting or telling them what to do or whatever the things, but just be there for other people. Let us use these difficult times to really understand and show how we can be compassionate with each other, how we can be supportive to each other, how we can be just human to each other, and drop everything else of how we're supposed to and how we're not supposed to. Let's not do that, because in the end of the day, what matters is us staying safe, us being there for each other, that human connection, going through this together and through those experiences. getting stronger and more resilient. And I feel like in order for us to be that resilient, to be that strong, we definitely need to show all the emotions of what's happening to ourselves, if not to other people, to be honest with them, to be there for them, to accept them, to allow them. So, my dears, I'm really, really hoping that you will take what's useful for you from my experience of what's happening and from my observations, and please start using it now. Even if you can do one thing today, maybe it's being honest with your emotions. Maybe it is just dropping all the supposed tos. Or maybe it is not judging other people or yourself when you're going through whatever the emotions you're going through, and just be there for yourself and for others. Thank you. Have a safe Friday and the week.